stream. Lauren, you are live. You are live.
Hi everybody, from Lauren down here and my new little friend, the lizardfish. We have just became close friends while waiting to go live for you all. So say hi, lizardfish. It's the first time we've seen one of these on a live as well. So we do have Rian on camera and we have Patrick on the surface. So right now I am at 9.1 meters, so quite shallow, and we do have some fishy friends to introduce you to. You just met Mr. Lizardfish, and we do have another exciting friend, the Great Barracuda, being cleaned to show you. So just before we go over there, we are actually above the Devil's Grotto. So if we were to just turn the corner and go down, we will enter into our favourite site, the Devil's Grotto. So let's swim towards Mr. Great Barracuda. Goodbye, Mr. Lizardfish, and over to you, Pat.
Welcome everybody. As we saw, we did just have our first ever lizardfish here on diveLIVE, so that's pretty exciting. They are quite a cool looking fish. Now don't forget, if you have any questions about this lizardfish, the barracuda we're about to see, or any other sort of thing that we have seen on this dive, please send in your questions. Make sure if you're on Twitter that you're using the hashtag diveLIVE so we can see it and answer it. This is a great shot here of this lizardfish. We can see it's got really long, kind of oddly shaped jaws. Underneath there's a bit of a V shape, and this is because they can really open and protrude their mouths out. So we're getting a great shot of that now. You can imagine that if that jaw was to come off and down the bottom, that it could really open up in the middle and engulf some quite large prey.
Sorry to interrupt you, Pat. I just need you to adjust that volume for me so that I can hear you better.
Yep, Jared's on it.
So yep, Rian is giving you a great view of the lizardfish slide, and the barracuda is here being cleaned. So let's go take a look, Rian.
So lizardfish are benthic animals, and what benthic means is that they live on the ocean floor. So we call the ocean floor the benthos, and any organism that kind of lives around it or on it is referred to as a benthic organism.
So Pat, there's not been any adjustments for me in the volume. You might have to shout if you need to get my attention.
And it's staying extremely still. It hasn't really moved since we've seen it. We can see its jaws moving very, very slightly to get that flow of oxygen over the gills, but apart from that, it doesn't seem to be moving its body at all. And we can see now that it has got those tiny little graspy teeth there to hold on to any prey that it might encounter. And there's no real surprises as to why it's called a lizardfish. Sitting there with its head up, it looks very reptilian. Wow, look at those colorations on the back there. This is an awesome sighting. Now lizardfish are actually in the class of, they are Cynodontates. So that is their their family.
So the barracuda's on the move, Rian, if you want to get a shot before he leaves us. He isn't a full-size barracuda, but this is a great barracuda, and he seems to be on his way up to the shallows. He was being cleaned, so he didn't miss that shot, unfortunately. But barracudas are great predators. They have a really pointy snout with seriously sharp beaks. And if you can see a cable in the shot in the minute, it is just our cable. I am attached to Rian by a cable, so if you did wonder what that was, it's our communication cable. So the barracuda was being cleaned in a cleaning station, and he's now on the move. And there is 27 different species of barracuda, but this is the one we definitely see the most here, and it's the most solitary one. You normally find it nice and alone underwater, and they can actually reach speeds of up to 35 miles per hour. So their bodies are streamlined and they are completely designed for speed.
And what was that in kilometers per hour?
35.
That was miles per hour.
Did I say kilometers?
You said 35 miles per hour?
Yeah, 35 miles per hour.
And that is 55 kilometers per hour.
Perfect, thank you, Mr. Conversion. So are you getting a nice view of the barracuda?
Yeah, we can see it really well. Now, these animals are ambush predators, so they will often hide behind things and ambush their prey. They do rely heavily on their eyesight for hunting, and so will hunt shinier fish, things with a bit of a reflective surface, such as the small silver sides that we get in this area. And as I said, they ambush them, and you can actually see this sometimes. They'll sit very still behind a piece of coral or a rock or some other hiding thing, and that is just waiting patiently till it can dart out just like that and catch itself some prey.
And their prey can consist of anchovies, small mullets, smaller slackers, and small birds. So they do have a great prey. And that has swum off, so we are going to now slowly head towards the grotto. Now the visibility really isn't great today, we do say that a lot, but it's just to give you an idea that we can see as well as normal. So we're just going to take you around this big coral outcrop and go a little bit deeper to see what we can find. Now I am completely open to finding anything today, so you please send in what you would like to see, and Pat will let me know and I will do my best to find it.
Yeah, and we have a question here from Proud Cat Mama just about those barracudas, asking why it's unsafe to eat them, and that is because they have quite a high parasite load. So whatever it is about barracudas, they just attract parasites, so quite often there can be some large worms and other parasitic organisms that can also harm the person eating it. So barracudas are not a real preferred food item for us humans.
Bacteria does build up in their flesh as well, so lots of people, especially in tropical countries, won't eat barracuda for this reason. The bacteria builds up and can be quite toxic in their flesh.
Yeah, so there is a lot of byproducts produced by bacteria. So sometimes it may not actually be the bacteria itself that's harmful, but one of the byproducts of their chemical reactions that go on inside their body. That is quite often where the harm comes from with bacteria.
So we're just swimming in amongst these beautiful coral bombings right now, and the colour should be very clear for you because we are quite shallow.
It looks like they're at the entrance of the cave for the Devil's Grotto right now. And seeing as we are over this complex reef, James would like to see some crustaceans today.
Oh, okay, I will do my very best. Anything specific?
No, just crustaceans in general.
Oh, okay, that makes it a little bit easier. Thank you, James. I do know where one of the spiny lobsters hides out, so I am going to do my best to try and find that one for you.
And yes, Christine, we do get sharks here on the reef. Most likely the one we are to see is the grey nurse shark.
It's been a while since we've seen a nurse shark, isn't it, Pat?
Yeah, it's been ages actually.
In general.
Oh, okay, that makes it a little bit easier. Oh, that must have been some people talking in the background on the surface. It's definitely not coming from underwater.
Yes, they are busy with the boats right now. And Clifford is asking about the barracuda as well, asking if they're dangerous, and no, they're not really a threat to us humans. There is, you know, a little bit of talk here and there about people being attacked by them, but that's generally because they have shiny jewellery that may look like a small fish that it thinks is food.
Yeah, anything reflective really. I particularly find them really curious animals. I don't find them threatening. They always just come up and check out what we're doing, have a little look, and then leave. But they do have a bad reputation, and the famous movie Finding Nemo probably did not help that reputation, as barracuda was the big villain. So you can see we are just swimming on top of these absolutely stunning coral outcrops where there's lots of cleaning activity going on and lots of fish life. We are just going to go over here and down into the Devil's Grotto. Now there's so many parrotfish just munching away here. I wonder if Rian can get a good view of the parrotfish crunching away on the coral, so I can actually hear them. Are you able? Oh, one of them's been cleaned. Are you able to see that?
Can't see them feeding, but yes, we can see right in the middle here that there is one being cleaned by quite a few little, I think they are wrasse that are cleaning it. So we can see that they're actively eating parasites off of that fish's body, which is what we refer to as cleaning.
Yeah, so there's just a tremendous amount of parrotfish here, and it does look like they're munching away on the coral, if you got to see that, but they are actually trying to get to the algae that lives inside the coral. And they're incredibly important fish, but they're also very naughty. So parrotfish will live in harems, and the harem will be managed, if you like, by one dominant male. So there will be many, many females that reside within a harem with one dominant male. But some of these young cheeky males who are wanting to mate but aren't quite at that stage in life yet, I'm sure we all know what we're referring to, they actually have lots of techniques and lots of strategies to try and get their way and mate with the female when they're actually too young to do so. So you have the sneakers and the streakers, which the parrotfish are absolutely famous for. So what they do, the streakers, just like the streakers that will run onto a football pitch, actually look very similar to young females. So they can use this to their advantage, and they can hang around the harem trying to look like a young female, and when the male and female are ready to spawn and do their little dance, the young male will just streak in and he will also spawn as well. It's so naughty, but that's him trying to mate with the female. And you also get the sneakers. So these are the even cheekier ones that will actually come into a harem, pretend to be a female, and when the dominant male isn't looking, he will mate with the female behind his back. Now, as you can imagine, this is not completely sustainable because the male will soon enough figure it out. So these parrotfish definitely have naughty modes of reproduction and survival.
They are cunning little fellas, and don't forget if you...
I thought you would like that, Pat.
Yes, yes.
Now, there are other divers in the area, so I'll just point that out in case they do get on our broadcast. So the Devil's Grotto is a really popular place to dive, so in case you see anybody else, it is just other divers diving the area.
And Chastity would like to see an octopus today.
No, there's quite a lot of requests for octopus. I would love to see one too. Now the visibility is not great, so it will make it a little bit more challenging for us, but we can try for sure.
Yeah, we can see right now that visibility is pretty bad, and it looks like there's quite a current. We can see the plankton, which is the little snowflakes, if you will, sitting there in the water. They are moving quite quickly, and there is quite a big concentration of them as well. So,
are you talking about current path?
yeah, just saying that the plankton looks like it's moving very quickly.
Yeah, there's a really strong current out here. So we're just getting out of the way of the other divers. Sorry about that. And we're back with you. And yes, Kat is right. It's a really strong current. So it's quite a workout for us. But I can't complain. Burn those calories. Oh, there's squid ink. There must have been a squid. It's not a lot, and it certainly hasn't inked from us, but right here is some ink. Can you see it?
Yes, we're seeing that very well. So that is the defense mechanism of a squid. They will shoot out an ink from their siphon, and this can confuse and blind the attacker.
And it is quite dark, so it could also be an octopus, but I can actually run my hand right through it. It's not dangerous. It is just ink that comes from the ink sacs of either an octopus or a squid, and it's used as a defense mechanism to confuse the predators so that they can't see what they were just about to eat. So they were obviously just going to try and eat the squid or the octopus, and they've inked, and then they lose sight of the animal. So that's quite an amazing technique, and there's actually a lot more of it hanging in the water column. I wonder where it came from.
Yeah, so if there is quite a lot in the water, then possibly there has been a school of squid together that has been attacked by some sort of predator. I would assume on this reef it would be the barracuda, and it would have caused them to ink collectively and leave quite a trace here in the water.
Yeah. So the ink of a squid is a blacky brown. It does have a brown undertone, whereas the ink of an octopus is almost jet black. So you can sort of look at the colours and see which animal has produced the ink. So we're just going to go over here, and I am going to try and find this lobster for James.
Yeah, great. And we also have a request for a French angelfish here from Heidi.
That one I can probably do.
She says that she loves their coloration, and so do we. Now we have a question here from Clifford, and he was asking whether there has been any storms in the area that could affect today's visibility, and you are completely right, yes. We have been getting good weather, but there's been some really fast-moving storm systems around the island, and although we haven't been hit directly, these patterns of weather offshore can stir things up and affect things outside of the storm range. So that is probably why we have a lot of things stirred up today.
Yeah, the weather has been quite temperamental here. It is hurricane season, so it is their low season. So you can expect temperamental weather.
And yes, Clifford, barracudas do eat squid.
Yes, they do, and so do nurse sharks, actually.
Yes.
I feel like we're long overdue this nurse shark. It should come and visit us soon.
And we have a comment here from your mum, Elaine, and she is saying, "Find Gretchen."
Okay, Mum, I will do my best to find Gretchen. It would be great to see a turtle, actually. It would be great to see a new turtle. We keep seeing the same individuals, but it would be just great to add a new individual to that database.
Yes, even a new individual of a different species of turtle, like a loggerhead or a green, would be great.
Well, I didn't want to jinx the show, but there has been a lot of talk of loggerheads around here. Now, I have never seen a loggerhead. For being a turtle expert, I have never seen a loggerhead in the water, so that would be my absolute dream come true. And to share it with you would just be out this world. Now we are on a long finger here near the grotto, and we do normally find lots of life here. So I'm glad we finally reached that and got out the way of the other divers. And let's see what we can find for you.
So as we're cruising through, we can see a lot of smaller fish, and these are actually a bulk of what makes up the reef. Quite often we don't talk a lot about the really small ones, but as we swim through here we can see, so the one closest to us to the left, that's a damselfish. All of the little blue ones in the background, they are blue and brown chromis. We can see that there's some parrotfish. So there always is quite a lot of small fish always here on the reef. That's a good shot of that blue chromis there.
Yeah, I haven't seen many bigger fish yet. The reef is just swarming with lots of small fish. There's lots of cleaning activity going on as well. Must be the perfect time to clean. We do actually have a small school of chubs, which we rarely do give attention to. So I'm going to get Rian to show you the chubs, which are actually being cleaned.
So those 4 or 5 black, well, silvery to black kind of grey fish there, they are the chubs, and they're quite a lot larger than the other fish there as well.
Now we do have a running inside joke that we never know what to say about chubs. They're completely nondescript, so we probably don't give them the attention that we should. So right now Rian's going to get you nice and close to these chubs. They have got an adorable face.
And they actually, they are a bit of a generalist predator, or not predator, sorry, they feed on quite a wide variety of things, but one of these, and the most peculiar of all these, is that they feed on vomit and poo of spinner dolphins. So how that came to be, or why they chose to eat that, I will never know, but I suppose if it works for them, it works.
I would prefer a brownie and ice cream myself, but I guess if it works and maybe no one else in the marine environment eats it, so they can have it all to themselves. So I think we have a big school of something up ahead. It could be the horse-eyed jacks that we haven't seen in a while, so we're going to go over and visit them, but I haven't got a clear vision yet of what they are.
Oh yes.
Yep, I think it's the horse eyes.
Yes, so those silverfish that are coming closer and closer, that is a big school of horse-eyed jacks. And you'll see why we call them horse-eyed jacks when we get closer, because they do have quite a big eye.
Yeah, oh, hello. I haven't seen these guys in quite a while. Nice to see you again. I love these fish.
Now, for any of people around the world who are looking at this fish and saying, that's not a jack, well, that's probably because you're seeing them, you're calling them trevallies. So they do have an interchangeable name. They are either jacks or trevallies, depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah, I used to call them trevallies, but I do like the name jack. And as Pat mentioned, they do have this big eye, which is where the horse eye part comes from. And they do have quite a forked yellow tail. So they're quite easy to identify. And they're always schooling. I don't think I've ever seen any of these jacks solitary. We always see them schooling together. But I'm not sure we've actually sighted this school whilst we have zoomed.
No, I don't believe we have, and we are getting some great close-up shots. It is a bit hard to find distinct details when they're in such a big school and we don't have the zoom, but now that we can single out individual fish, we can really see the real form and morphology of this fish.
Now, whether to say this is a school or a show would actually be quite difficult, because the fact that they're always aggregating together may mean that they are coming together for social reasons, not just to feed. So I'm not sure whether we should say school or show for this one. There's lots of small ones. There's a tiny juvenile one. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it. Oh, Rian, they're including you in the school.
Yeah, they're all coming straight for Rian.
Yeah, they are.
This is his induction ceremony into the Horse-Eye Club.
I think he's failed. They're leaving. Yeah, so there's lots of juveniles here and big ones. There's a whole hierarchy here of different ages, I believe.
And we can see towards the back of their tail, they've got quite an unusual structure, and these are actually spikes. So it's actually it's a long, thin line of spikes, and we call these scoots. Just like what we call the scales on the side of a turtle's face is also what these are called here on the jacks, as scoots. Now, if you were to grab this jack by its tail, it would probably slice your hand to the bone. They are very sharp and a good defense mechanism.
I've never seen these guys feed. Have you, Pat?
No, they've always schooling around in circles, but yeah, never actually seen them actively feeding.
We do have the the classic chub joining in at the back there, and a black durgan. It seems to be any time we see a large aggregation of fish, there's for some reason some chubs and a black durgan. Oh wow! I'm so close to these fish right now.
Yeah, they are actually known to be attracted to the diver's bubbles. I'm not sure whether there's any actual truth to this. This is all anecdotal evidence, but a lot of people do seem to think that they are attracted to scuba divers because of the bubbles.
They were attracted to me.
I'm sure they also find you gorgeous.
Oh, thank you, Pat. But adding on from that, they do seem to be really unfazed that I am here. They're not really moving away from me that quickly, or we are.
Now, jacks do tend to feed mostly on invertebrates such as small shrimps and crabs. They will also eat smaller fish as well, particularly if there's a big bait ball. A bait ball being just a big school of very, very small fish.
Are they nocturnal, Pat? There seems to be a different species in amongst them as well. There seems to be, is it a barjack?
No, I think that is a crevalle jack. But yes, that is definitely a different species.
And it has some marking on it, some sort of something growing on it, or maybe an infection. So there's definitely one jack in there that's not of her size. Maybe it's a yellow jack.
I think that's a crevalle jack.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't hear that.
But yeah, it's blended in very well with its cousins there.
And we came a lot deeper. We're now at 11.4, so we've gone from being in the shallows to coming much deeper to swim with this.
And please do send in any questions you have about these jacks as well. So these fish are very good fighters in terms of recreational fishing, so they are quite often targeted in fishing, and that's because of their disc-like body that's really flattened but also at the same time very muscular. So this creates a lot of push in the water and allows them to accelerate really quickly. And now when you combine that with their deeply forked tail, that once again will increase power and efficiency whilst also reducing drag by having that force in the tail. So they are made for speed, these fish. We saw one chasing that chub out of the school. I think it's clicked on that is not a jack.
So Pat, I'm not maybe very able to do that well. So just to let you know, volume is quite difficult for me down here. Shall we go find that lobster, baby? Yes. So we're gonna go and look for invertebrates. They do seem to be a firm favourite of everyone.
So just to clarify, Richard, they are horse-eyed jacks that we just saw. Horse-eyed jacks.
So while we're travelling over to the lobster, we hope it's going to be in its den. We can see lots of garden eels.
Yeah, so they are all not very far out of their burrows right now. They're not actually as small as they come across. Actually, they're probably much larger. Most of it, they're about 50 to 60 centimetres. But oh, that's a very good close-up here of those little heads sticking out. So these are a garden eel, and look at the size of those eyes. This is a great shot. We usually see a lot of garden eels here on Dive Live, but now with this zoom we can really see what they look like and get a feel for them.
Quite some way in front of us. All I can see in my visibility is a lot of garden eels.
Oh, and this one is feeding, which is great. So they are taking little pieces of plankton out of the water. Plankton being plants and algae that don't actually have the power to fight the current, and so just drift along in the current. And these guys are all sitting out. If we could see them all at the same time, we could see that they'd all be facing in the same direction, just facing into the current, so that their work is done for them. The food is brought to them rather than having to go to the food. And they will stay in this burrow for their whole lives unless to mate. That is the only exception, that a garden eel will really leave their burrows completely.
So I'm just going to show you something that's growing out of the sandy patch. And Pat, maybe you can confirm if they are feather dusters or not. But I've never seen them on the sand like this before, so let's take a closer look.
Yes, they are feather duster worms. Called so because they look exactly like a maid's little feather duster that she'd use to clean her house.
Yes, they do. So they're really closely related to the Christmas tree worms, which we actually saw on the first dive of today. But these are feather duster worms, and normally you do see them in amongst the corals in the shallows, but I have never seen them just growing out of a sandy patch like this. Have you, Pat?
Yes, I have seen it a couple of times. They do tend to create these colonies in the sand, I have noticed.
Well, if we were to get close, which we won't, we're staying quite far back, Rihanna's using the zoom, they can do something similar to the Christmas tree worms, and they can completely close themselves up and retreat. So we don't want to make them do that, but they are worms. They are polychaetes, so they're segmented worms. And there is actually 13,000 different species of segmented worms throughout both land and marine kingdoms. So they definitely don't look like little worms.
Not at all, but that is the fascination behind polychaetes. So they are, as Lauren said, segmented worms that live both on land and under the water. Now on land you'll see your general earthworms and species such as that, but underwater they have diversified incredibly. The amount of adaptations that some polychaete species have made is ridiculous. So we have these types here that we can see that use that feed by extending these fans out the top and filtering food out of the water, right to the other polychaetes, that like the narrator polychaetes, they will have big jaws that they can literally spew out of their mouth to grab the prey and pinch the prey and bring it back into their body. So they are a really, really diverse and also super fascinating phylum of animals.
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to the Christmas trees, which we can maybe try and point some out for you once we leave here, they do use this feather duster part to harness their oxygen and to capture their food. So the actual worm is buried deep inside the sand, so we can't actually see that. We can just see the top part that sticks out with the little feather duster.
And Proud Cat Number is asking, do they have a purpose? And yes, they most certainly do. All fish, all species in an ecosystem serve a purpose. So for this feather duster worms, we can look at it in terms of their lifestyle. So they sit there and filter the water, so we can assume that some of the things they're filtering out are harmful to the ecosystem, so therefore they are purifying the water. Now on top of that, they will also serve as food for other predators that like to eat worms and other invertebrates. So they are feeding and cleaning the water, feeding the animals and cleaning the water. So everything that you can find in an ecosystem is playing some sort of role. We are all connected.
And they can come in a array of different colours. These ones are very transparent looking, but they can come in pinks and purples and yellow colours as well. And I actually think we have another very similar one called the horse just inside here. Now I'm trying not to get too close because they will also close up. So hopefully I can get it for you. Are you able to see just underneath this rock are the horseshoe species?
I'm struggling to find a visual on it at the moment. Yes, so we can see, yes, just under, we have two there. So those two really, well, it almost looks like just feathers coming out there.
With a very protective damselfish nearby. So this is really closely related to the feather duster worm, and this is the horse species. So again, they're translucent in colour, but there is, from what I can see, nestled under the rock here. So I hope you were able to see that.
And
we are going to continue towards it. Leave the sandy patch a little bit and look for the lobster.
Alright, so Craig was asking what the green stuff on the sand was, and that is just algal growth. So a lot of this is turf algae.
Are you getting a good visual on that part?
Yeah, we can see it quite well. We can see all of the individual little feathers coming out, so that's great. And we have a question here from Morag, and Morag wants to know, is this area protected? And it most certainly is. So there is quite a few marine protected areas here on Grand Cayman Islands, and right down to the point where there's even no scuba zones. So they do see the value in protecting these reefs and have implemented some marine parks to counter that. Wow, as you can see, all those feather duster worms retracting as we come over them. Oh, and it looks like we have a jawfish here as well, poking its head out. So it's interesting to see all the little critters just living in the sand as we move across it here. They're all quite cute little animals.
Yeah, so we're just going to look over here to where I believe a lobster lives. And I do apologise, Pat, it's really difficult for me to hear you. So if I do talk over you at any point, I do apologise in advance.
That is okay. So we'll be keeping our eyes out as we see us coming over this reef. We can see that there's quite a few complex little caves and cracks. So we're going to be looking in here for any sorts of lobster.
Yes, we don't know if we will find it, but we will try. I do like looking in the ledges and the cracks and the crevices, because you never know what you're going to find. And I'm not forgetting that French angelfish, don't worry.
So we got a gorgonian there hanging off that rock with all of its polyps extended. Now this is quite frequently we see this, that the gorgonians have their polyps, or the little animals that live inside them, extended. And usually we don't see it with the stony corals, but for some reason or another, I'm not really sure why, it tends to be mostly the gorgonians that have their polyps extended during the day, whereas the rest will have them out at night time. And we're really getting to highlight what I mean here by polyps. So each of those individual little animals coming out of the coral skeleton there, that is a polyp. So each one is a mouth surrounded by 8 tentacles, which we can see really well here. Wow, this is an awesome shot. Now these polyps do feed by the same method as the feather duster worms that we saw before, in that they filter the food out of the current. So they're just waiting for the plankton to come. They'll grab it with their tentacles and quite often sting it using nematocysts, which are their stinging cells, and then they will put the prey into their mouth to be digested in a digestive cavity that lives inside of the coral.
I have a visual on where the lobster should be, so fingers crossed to everyone watching that it's there. If it's not, don't worry, we will find something exciting instead. So let me just have a little look.
And while we're looking for it, Lauren, do you just want to give us a quick air check? Monique here is being a good dive buddy.
Well, in a second. I'm just going to show Jan where the lobster should be, and he'll go for a big exploration. I think it's there. We have one big spiny lobster. So my air is 100 bar. And just let me know when you can see this lobster is coming out to say hello.
Yeah, we can see that now, moving out of its little lair there.
Yeah, so James, this is for you. This is a spiny lobster. And they are named so because they actually do have little spines on their shell. I'm not sure if they are visible, but that's where the name comes from. And they are not true lobsters. They don't have these big claws on them, and they're actually not even really closely related to the true lobsters. Their shell, their exoskeleton, is actually much harder than a true lobster as well. So they're very different. And the animal that you can see right now is most likely a male. I can't confirm it, but male lobsters do tend to guard a den. So they do tend to find an area and just stay within that little den. Now, probably why they do this is because they are territorial, but also for the ladies. So I'm sure Pat is going to laugh at this one. But how it works is that lobsters, or spiny lobsters especially, are said to be serial monogamous. Now this makes me laugh. So they're not fully monogamous, but they will be loyal and monogamous to one lady at a time. So how it works, when the ladies are ready to molt, and what that means is when they shed this exoskeleton so they can grow a bit before growing a new one, they need to be protected. So they're very vulnerable and they need someone to look after them. So they're most likely going to hook up with the neighborhood tough guy, which is probably this guy that you can see right now. So the female will approach his den. That's why they have dens. It's a little love nest, and she will actually waft her pheromone-laced urine. So her urine will contain lots of pheromones, which will actually relax the male, making him much more less aggressive and much more ready to get jiggy. So she will waft her urine into the den, and once he's in the mood, he will accept her and she will come into this little hidey hole where he is right now. And then she will molt. So she will slip into something much more comfortable. She will get rid of that skeleton and he will protect her, because at this point she is completely vulnerable with no hard shell for protection. This is when they do mate, and he does give her his sperm. So once they've mated and she's grown her new skeleton, she actually will just say, "Thanks mate," and she'll leave. So she will leave the den and she will be on her way. And then a few days later, the next female will be lining up outside the den, wafting her urine in. So it's great to be a lobster.
Yeah, you really set the scene there for us, Lauren. Thanks for that.
I love that story. And there is actually studies that show within a localized specific area, the female lobsters actually stagger their molting period, so they don't all molt at the same time, in order to sort of form this conga line with the local dominant male. So it's a very intricate pattern, this mating system. And just to give you some background on what you're seeing right now, those big long antennas, which are probably out right in front of him, maybe even towards that blue tang. He doesn't look too happy to see that tang. Oh, they're definitely not happy to see the tang. They are the defense sort of mechanism. These big long antennas, which are quite spiky. They have little spines. They are the ones used in fighting in defense. That's why they're so long. They extend right out the front of the body in order to protect the lobster. But underneath there is actually another sort of pair of antennae called antennas. And this, if you like, is the nose of the lobster. This is where the lobster smells. Now they are olfactory predators, so they do rely heavily on their sense of smell. And these antennas are covered in hairs which have chemoreceptors, and they can actually have well over 400 different types of receptors. So all this means is that they are really good at smelling odors and chemical signals in the water. Now they've actually been compared to having the sense of smell more akin to that of dogs than human beings. They're way better at smelling than we are. Now if Leon can just get you a close-up of their eyes, they do have quite large eyes. They're called compound eyes, but they're really not that good at vision. So they are made up of little lenses, and you would think that they would have great vision, but as I mentioned, they are olfactory predators, reliant on their sense of smell. So in fact, their eyes are quite poor. So in bright lights, they're almost completely blind. But that doesn't matter because they have their nose, if you like. And even in dim lights, they can almost just see shadows, just see motion. They do not have good vision. So I hope you're getting an incredible view of this big male spiny lobster.
Yes, and I feel like I've just learned about everything about them in that little spiel then. So yeah, as Lauren was saying, that they are very, very chemosensitive, meaning that they are sensitive to chemicals. And there was actually an interesting study done on this where they saw where the spiny lobsters made their homes or their lairs in relation to where they placed octopus. And they placed octopus in a certain pattern, and because they are predators of the lobsters could pick up their scent in the water, and the lobsters actually made their homes around this pattern of the octopus. So no matter where the octopus was, the lobster could pick it up and made their homes elsewhere. So they essentially just made a pattern of lobsters by strategically placing these octopus, which, it's an interesting experiment, and it really does highlight just how sensitive to chemicals these lobsters are.
Oh, absolutely, and they can actually even determine just by smelling the difference in two very similar mussels, two different mussels that we would not be able to tell the difference between, but they can because of their keen sense of smell. And these animals can actually resort to cannibalism as well, so they can eat each other if that is necessary. And of course, humans do enjoy to eat lobster, and they will eat the spiny lobster species, but normally around the world there are size limits. You don't want to eat the small ones that haven't become sexually mature yet, and you definitely don't want to go for the really, really big ones that contain all that good genetic material. When a lobster is pregnant, you will be able to see on her abdomen, on the underside, you will see all her bright red eggs. And we often say when a lobster is pregnant that she is berried, because it does look like she has lots of berries on her abdomen. I had been waiting to see a female in this lobster's den, but so far it's only just him.
And we have a question from Clifford asking about how big these lobsters can get, and the spiny lobster can get up to 80 or 90 centimetres of the really big ones, carapace length, so that's not including their antennae. And we have
antennas, they would be a lot longer. Now this guy is really checking out Rian. He's really wondering what this camera is doing here. And they're quite fast movers, so they are nocturnal. They do come out at night time, and they can move really fast across the landscape. And they are able to always find their way back to this den, and that will be with their keen sense of smell. And they even have a really awesome technique at deterring predators. So these big long antennas that you can see, they can actually rub them against the smooth part of their shell, not the spiny part, and it makes this really awful screeching sound. And that can actually deter a predator. It can sort of make the predator to go, whoa, no, I'm not going to go for that one, with that really noisy screeching.
And
fascinating animal.
so a few people have been asking what that small fish that Rian just showed us on the camera was, and that is a arrow blenny. So an arrow blenny, they are quite curious looking little fellas.
Yeah, I'm way behind here. I don't want to disturb the scene, so you can let me know what's going on, Pat.
Yeah, so we have an arrow blenny here on camera, a really little one that Rian's found and picked up. It's quite a cute looking little animal. Now, blennies are very cool, and they have a whole range of adaptations. They're a very diverse little group of fish, these blennies, and one of the really funny and interesting adaptations is that they can actually move their eyes independently. So this does make them pretty hard photo subjects because their eyes are going off in all different directions, but it is very funny to just sit there and watch them for a while moving these eyes about.
Yeah, it gives them a bit of a bonk eye in photographs.
And we can see its tail is always bent. Now, why this is doing this, I actually do not know. It's quite strange, and it's just always got a bent tail, and it's using it. I'm just saying how it's strange how this blenny has a very bent tail, and it's moving its pectoral fins to move, and not moving its tail at all.
I think this is the one that we did once incorrectly identify as a juvenile trumpet fish, and that was because of this sort of bent tail appearance, which is why we got it so wrong. I'm so glad you're able to see that.
It's really, really cool.
It must be about 7 or 8 millimeters. It's definitely under a centimeter for sure. That's how small this animal really is. So I've got 80 bars. I've got about 30 bar left with you, but we are going to stay down here with the lobster in the blenny and just enjoy it for a little longer.
It is a really rare sight to see one of these, so oh, now it's looking even better here in the light.
The light does keep going on and off. I'm not sure why. Rian is adjusting it.
Now what's really interesting about these little fellas is that if they find, so we have shown you quite a range of different burrowing worms today that had their little tubes, such as the feather duster worm and the horseshoe worm. So these guys, if they come across an empty tube for one of these worms, they will actually make it as their own home. So they will back up into it and inhabit that little tube as a little safety and ambush spot. And this is...
The lobster's glad to not be the centre of attention.
And this is consistent across blennies as well. So quite often we'll see blennies make homes out of other structures. Even the other day I saw a tiny little opening on the sponge, and what do you know, there was a little blenny head poking out of it. So they really just inhabit any kind of little burrow.
And I'm about 1 or 2 meters behind Rian, and I can barely even see this fish, so he's doing a great job of capturing it on screen. Okay, so we are going to move from where we are right now, and we're just going to come a little bit shallower as my air is getting slightly lower. And we'll see what we can find before we end the dive. I have been looking for some shrimps. I was requested to find crustaceans, so managed to get the lobster, and I would also love to show you some shrimps, so let's see. But please do send in any questions you have before we do end the dive.
Now we do still have time to take on any questions that you may have, so don't forget to send them in. And if you are on Twitter, please hashtag diveLIVE.
I'm also going to keep my eyes peeled for some Christmas tree worms, even although we saw them this morning. We have spoke about them on this dive. We've showed you the feather dusters and the horseshoes, so it would be good to round that up with just showing you some Christmas tree worms for those of you who haven't seen them.
And Lauren, Chastity wanted to know what the spiny lobster eats.
Sorry, Pat, it's really difficult to hear you. If you were able just to answer any questions at the minute.
So Chastity was asking what the spiny lobster eats, and it will actually eat a wide variety of things. It is carnivorous, but the most interesting of this is that it will eat other lobsters if need be, so they can go cannibal.
Okay, so we have got a pair of Christmas tree worms. So it will look like 4, but it's actually 2 separate worms with 2 crowns coming out of either one. So Rian is just going to show you this Christmas tree worm, another segmented worm, just to summarize what we have been talking about earlier. So many people think that these are the prettiest, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I like them all. I particularly like the feather dusters. But these Christmas tree worms operate in almost the same way, using these crowns to harness their oxygen and to feed. So it is just like the other worms. And the actual worm is buried way inside the rocks in the coral here. So we're not actually able to see that. What we're seeing is quite literally just the tip of the iceberg. So 2/3 of the animal will be hidden down inside. And they are really long-living worms. They can live 30 years of age, which is longer than a lot of the reef fish. But normally between 10 to 20 years is more common. And they found a perfect technique of just burying themselves in to the coral and to the rock to avoid getting eaten. They are also able to just retract the crowns, bring them right back inside their little burrows and close their little burrows with a thing called an operculum. So they really have got a perfect protection for themselves. Even those feather duster worms were quite camouflaged and protected in the sand. Oh, and we do have a little porcupine fish hiding out over here. Let's go and say hello.
And just to clarify, P. Hart wanted to know what the little tubes around that Christmas tree worm were, and they were just little sponges.
So we're just approaching a porcupine fish. Someone did request one earlier today, so we've delivered for you on the second dive, and it's just hiding out here under a little ledge in amongst lots of tiny micro shrimps, I think. Are you able to see that?
Yeah, we can see all of these mysid shrimp all cruising about here. There's thousands of them, so they are little crustaceans.
So the porcupine fish is another nocturnal predator. So this one's probably just seeking refuge under this ledge where it's nice and dark, and it's just resting until feeding time, which will come tonight again. Now these are a favourite on diveLIVE because they do let us get quite close, and they are just absolutely adorable with their big eyes and those big teeth that you can see. So they are a kind of ambush predator, but they don't eat other fish. They use these strong teeth, which hopefully you just saw, and they do like to crunch on shellfish and crustaceans. They also have this funny little technique of sucking in water and spurting it out at their potential prey. So this will obviously stun the prey and probably momentarily confuse them. And the porcupine fish seem to enjoy it. They seem to find it funny that they are quite literally able to play with their food.
And they also, on top of all this, have a toxin as well called tetrodotoxin. And this is actually produced by bacteria living within the animal. It is not produced by the porcupine fish itself.
Yeah, and if they do move the porcupine fish to areas where this bacteria is not available, then the toxin is not present within these fish's flesh. Now, of course, they are in the porcupine fish kind of grouping of animals because they are able to inflate themselves like a big balloon, and they do have spikes which will go on end. So as Pat mentioned, the toxin, the inflation and the spines, they are well protected against predators. But the sort of trade-off for that is that they really are not very good swimmers. They're very cumbersome and they're not very fast. So they're not so good at escaping the big predators, who would namely be sharks and the likes of killer whales. Now I have hit 50 bar. It was a slightly deeper dive, but I do hope you enjoyed that. We were able to find the lobster. Let's just do porcupine fish for this. And we were able to show you 3 different types of very closely related worms. So we will be back tomorrow morning at 7 AM, and I do hope you'll join us. So thank you everyone. Thank you Rian. Thank you Pat. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you everyone. Look forward to seeing you under the water tomorrow.